today's reflection, it occurred to me that sometimes it is helpful to think about things that are not true and not even accurate. For instance, sometimes it is helpful to think about journeys as coming in two kinds. You could take an outward journey into the world, Brazil, New Mexico. It could be a vacation or a hike or even a long drive. Alternatively, you could find yourself on an inward journey. And this could be a dream, a meditation, a hallucinogenic experience, or even a seizure of extreme emotion. Or just a moment to reflect on your life. The outward journey is, in essence, an interaction with the material world and the beings that populate it. The inner journey is a trip into our own subjectivity. An outward journey changes the shape of the world and your interaction with it. An inward journey changes your sense of yourself. It changes your sense of what things mean. So, inner, who you are. Outer, how you act. Inner has to do with meaning. Outer has to do with kinesis, movement. And maybe now the useful lie becomes more apparent, for there is no meaning without movement, and no movement without meaning. There is no sense of self without behavior. And there is no action without subjectivity. So a journey to an exotic locale begets a shift in your perspective. This happens on the field of meaning. A journey into an expansive consciousness begets a shift in how one interacts with one's surroundings. Kinesis. What is true is that a true journey induces an altered state as it involves some extraordinary activity. So an outward journey, that altered state is one of location. In an inward journey, the altered state is one of consciousness. And of course, an altered location will alter consciousness. And an altered consciousness will alter how one interacts with your location. Both so-called outward and inward journeys induce altered states of being. So it is true that a true journey induces an altered state because it involves some extraordinary activity. It is also true that shifts of meaning will have a kinesthetic byproduct. As your consciousness changes, so will your behavior. Meanwhile, a kinesthetic impact will shift meaning. If you do something different in the world, if something different happens around you, it will shift the way that you conceive of yourself and that you conceive of everything. Those are two things that are true. What is variable is the depth and duration of those shifts. kinesis is incessant. It is happening right now to you and the person next to you and me. It happens when you go to the grocery store, when you daydream through the steam of your coffee. It happens whether you will it to or not. That relationship between a shifting, evolving meaning and sense of self and a shifting, evolving, interactive world. It might even be that a true journey is less dependent on the exoticness of the experience and more dependent on the intentionality of your integration. So let me back up a second. I keep using the phrase true journey. By that, I just mean that something that is outside of the normal, everyday living life. So not going to the store. It's an opportunity for us to bring that relationship between shifting consciousness and shifting place into the forefront of our thinking by its strangeness. Either we do something that takes us strangely into our interior, or we go to a strange place, and because of that, they're outliers. They give us an opportunity to really focus on this moment and the relationship that's building here between kinesis and meaning. A true journey invites us to be intentional about the depth and duration of the shifts in being that they induce. It's just that something exotic gets more attention. But in that vein, I think you can make a pretty good argument for our practices. What we're doing right now are true journeys. Church is a trip. It is an altered state of being. How often do you find yourself singing with people, praying with people, giving your money away, being reflective in a group, sharing and sympathizing in so public a fashion? Do that on Tuesday. It's probably pretty rare, maybe just once a week, that you do all those things in a set amount of time. So this gathering is fairly extraordinary. On the scale of going to the grocery store for shiitake mushrooms and going to the mountain for hallucinogenic mushrooms, we, right now, are a lot closer to Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds than we are to Muzak. And in any case, be it to church or to the mountain, the depth and duration of any shift procured from a true journey depends on how consciously you integrate it into your daily living. What we do here, the effect of what we do here, depends on how consciously you integrate it. Integrate being the key word here, integrate it into your daily living. So there's nothing particularly exotic about integration itself. Journaling, therapy, group processing, singing songs that remind you of the experience, or even just reflecting while sitting on your patio are examples of ways to integrate experience, and these will all serve you to varying degrees. So, meaning and kinesis form this feedback. When you think about it, and consider that feedback loop as part of any journey, highlighting a true journey. It starts to break down the distinction between subject and object. Meaning internal, kinesis external. But if they are in a feedback loop, they become so related as to become almost one process, one thing. So that loop breaks down the distinction between subject and object and ramps right up into intersubjectivity, right up into I and thou, and right up into what I am calling the carbon rule. What I do to you, I do to myself. Our inner life impacts the world, and the world impacts our inner life. And eventually, the distinction between the two gets awfully fuzzy. So for me, this raises the question, when we journey, if I can go back to the lie, when we journey inward, where are we going? What is the who that is experiencing this journey? If subject and object are broken down. Now you might think that a rather obtuse or obscure question with no bearing on the tasks that await you after the benediction and coffee. But properly integrated, the insight gained through journeying into such a question, I think, will have a kinetic impact on your life. It has the possibility to alter your behavior. But before we get to the question of where are we going, what is the who, I want to ask another question. It may sound like a non sequitur, but it is not. What do we have in common with a wildflower? Well, on the way to a general and essential answer, we may find that we have a lot in common with a wildflower. You can imagine many things that we have in common, but generally and essentially, we can at least say that we, wildflowers and us, are both products of the earth. Don't be fooled by the fact that the flower literally has roots in the soil and we do not. We are as much a product of terrestrial processes as any wildflower. So if you would, bring to mind, imagine, we're taking that journey described earlier. With your imagination, bring to mind a single wildflower. All the better if it is actually one that you have seen and can remember. Mine is orange. Its petals meet in a black nexus. Its stalk is pale green, lined by peach fuzz-like filaments that glow in the right angle. And it grows amongst a thicket of other flowers up through a bed of rocks, and it's bigger than most of them, most of its sibling flowers. And there's a mesquite tree nearby, which sometimes casts this flower in shade. Now that particular flower, the flower that I just described, and the flower that you have in your mind's eye, that particular flower cannot be itself anywhere else. If it was someplace else on the path, in the yard, in the world, it would have a different size, a different weight, different strength, and different curve to the stalk. Leaves would appear at different places and angles, and its petals would have grown slightly differently. That particular flower that you have in your mind cannot be itself anywhere else but where it is. The light, water, shade, soil, competition, and obstacles are unique in that space to that flower. That flower is the result of countless influences interacting with a few basic yearnings. There are other flowers nearby, but they are grossly or particularly different. Different sizes, facing different directions. Each one is different. Though they share many similar attributes, they are each unique. Yet they are all the results, or the process itself, of ongoing influences and genetic origins. The life force surging through the flower passes through the sieve of opportunities, internal and external abilities and obstacles, and distributes its attention accordingly, and it grows this way or that. We have that in common with this wildflower. Like that flower, we are the result of countless influences interacting with a few basic yearnings. The life force surging through us passes through a sieve of opportunities, internal and external abilities and obstacles, and distributes its attention accordingly, and we go this way or that. If you ever wonder why a saint decides to do one thing and a sinner another, it is because the ongoing influences that interact with biological predispositions dictate that a certain choice gets made. If you were in my shoes, you would have made the same decisions that I have made. If you were in the shoes of the person doing the most vile act, you would have made the same decisions that that person made. When I consider that, I feel an immediate sense of kinship and compassion and connection with everyone. Kinship, compassion, and connection is one implication of the understanding that you would do what I do, given my influences and genetic predispositions. Another implication is that there is no such thing as normal. You are not normal. You have no hope if you want to be normal. That everyone is unique also means everyone is weird. Do not wonder why Bill does this thing that you would never do, or Alice acts in that way. You would too, and likely do by some other name or behavior, because everyone is weird. Your expectations for what a normal person does is a complete fantasy. The influences are countless. Thus, there are countless variations of all manner of matter. Normal is a fiction with no truth to it. And that actually may be a delight. There's a lot of freedom in that idea. You can let your freak flag fly. On the other hand, it could also make you feel isolated, being so unique. And yet there are two truths that hold us. And I think they're related to the idea that I mentioned earlier, that you would do what I do, I would do what you do. Though we are each unique, there is a fundamental kinship there. And it's also true that we have an affinity for each other and for the processes and beings of this planet. We can recognize similarities that go beyond the obvious, perhaps, but just to name a few, from the eyes of the person next to you to the eye of a flower is an affinity, to the eye of a storm, to the swirl of a galaxy, to the knot left behind in a beam of wood. Matter and processes seem to organize in ways that rhyme with each other. And if you need it, I give you permission to see family there. To see yourself. All the more so because I cannot help but imagine some essence of being, some kind of yearning that emerges in and through and perhaps along with all of these manifestations of matter and process. Some yearning expressing itself through me, through you, through the flower. Each an articulation of some common, essential energy or drive. We are light given form. Being is light hardened into a form upon which it can become sensible to itself. And form by its nature is a restriction. So we are recognized in our restrictions. But it is by our shared essence and familiar articulations that I can also recognize an underlying unity, a kinship, and find myself connected to all existence, where existence is one big family. Each member unique, each weird, sometimes squabbling, sometimes loving, but each a part of each and connected to all, recognized, remembered, claimed, and loved. So that trip, the wildflower, that trip into my shoes, that trip to church, that's a journey. You will integrate it. I wonder how. May I help you begin? Do you have your notebooks? If you need a notebook, would you raise your hand and people will bring you one? So after I give you the prompt, you will have about 4 minutes to begin your integration in words or pictures in your journal. Please bear in mind that these are anonymous and public reflections, and they give us the practice of being reflective and vulnerable and generous. And if you don't feel like writing today, please take this time to read the journals. So here's the problem. I'd like you to recall that flower. Give a brief description of its appearance, sense, whatever impacts you. And then list the ways and the manner in which you share some affinity with that flower in shape, movement, whatever comes to mind. So describe your flower, and then describe how you are like that flower.